Hyvää huomenta, good morning everyone, and welcome to this webinar hosted by WWF Finland and Bain Company. My name is Jonas Fritze, I'm the Communications Director at WWF Finland, and I'm glad to see so many people joining as our topic is very important. Today we'll focus on businesses and biodiversity. In this webinar, we will present the key findings of the new Finnish Businesses and the Biodiversity Crisis report that was launched a few weeks ago by WWF and Bain Company. We will also provide you with insights and ideas on how to take biodiversity into consideration in your business and highlight some of the benefits that early movers could be enjoying. Our agenda can be seen here on the screen. We'll start with a presentation from CEO Liisa Roveder of WWF Finland, and Liisa will tell us how nature is doing at the moment and why you absolutely should care about biodiversity. After Liisa, we'll hear from partner Jani Kelloniemi and senior manager Nikos Nirvi from Bain Company, and they will present the highlights from the report. Our final presentation comes from conservation advisor Jussi Nikula, and Jussi's presentation is called How Will the Transition Shape Businesses and How to Get Ready. Jussi will also present the new Biodiversity Risk Filter tool that was launched by WWF earlier this year. We'll finish with a short Q&A. You can drop your questions to the chat and we'll pick a few that will be addressed at the end. But now, without further ado, I will give the stage to Liisa.
Thank you, Jonas, and good morning for all of you. And it's really great to have all of you today together with us. And I thank you for joining us and taking your time this morning. So it's certainly evident for all of us that there is a global biodiversity crisis and that all of us are responsible to help to halt and reverse the nature loss for the sake of our planet and future generations. We in WWF are very happy that countries finally came to an agreement for nature at UN Biodiversity Conference in Montreal in December 2022. Now all countries have a global goal to halt and reverse nature loss, conserve 30% of the land, freshwater and ocean areas, and restore 30% of the degraded ecosystems by 2030. Targets also include a commitment to significantly reduce overconsumption of natural resources. If we take seriously fulfilling the targets, we have certainly no time to lose. We have only 7 years left. This sustainability transition will also have implications for businesses, and that is why we are here today. The sustainability sciences tell us that only transformative change will enable sustainable development. And times of transition, of course, they are full of risks and opportunities, but they are also moments for learning. At WWF, we encourage Finnish companies to step up to the task of reversing nature loss. But as always, we are also eager to learn and work together for the solutions. This is why we have worked together with Bain Company, and I want to thank Bain for the cooperation in this project. For the orientation, I will now go through some facts about biodiversity. Biodiversity is the foundation of human life on Earth. That is a fact. It is hard to overestimate the importance of nature to people. It supports our societies, businesses with critical natural goods and services that we depend on, the so-called ecosystem services. In addition to the food we eat, the clothes we wear, and the diverse nature we enjoy so much, biodiversity increases ecosystems' resilience towards, for instance, climate change. Although biodiversity is crucial for our well-being and for the well-being of the whole societies, we have taken ecosystem services for granted during the past decades and caused significant damage and pressure for the biodiversity. And this has caused the biodiversity crisis. The biodiversity crisis can be measured by different indicators. And one such indicator is WWF Living Planet Index. The Living Planet Index from 22 shows that vertebrate species populations have declined by an average on 69% between 1970 and 2018. This means that biodiversity is threatened and has declined significantly in the past decades. And it is really important to notice that the change has happened in about 50 years' time. The Living Planet Index is a clear warning sign, nature's cry for help, because it's not doing well. However, it should also be the warning sign for us humans. The greater the loss of biodiversity and degradation of ecosystems, the less likely they are to recover from exterior shocks such as the hot and dry cycles caused by the climate change. The risks for businesses are also increasing. The increasing pressure for nature is caused by human activities, which is clear for us. Land use change is the biggest single threat for nature globally, and this picture illustrates it. 75% of the planet's ice-free surface has been significantly altered by us, by human activities. And as an example, agriculture has caused 80% of the forest loss, and food production is responsible of 70% of the biodiversity loss on land. My second example is about human use of natural resources. As an example, 90% of global fish stocks are either overfished or exploited to their limit. Think about 90%. Globally, people are using natural resources far beyond the sustainable level. For instance, in Finland, we are using natural resources more than 3.5 times over the nature's capacity. Our so-called overconsumption day this year is in the end of March. Rest of the year, we are living on debt. Degradation of biodiversity is a threat on global scale, but unfortunately also local scale, and Finland is no exception. Thus, I have one example from the Finnish perspective. Finnish forestry, the way it's practiced today, is not sustainable. Many forestry practices should be changed and the protected areas network should be significantly increased. According to the Finnish Red List assessment, 76% of Finnish forest biotopes are endangered and 21% is on risk for being threatened. Almost all forests are from that perspective, like threatened or endangered. But on the other hand, positive is that according to the Montreal Biodiversity Agreement and the EU Biodiversity Strategy, this will certainly change during the coming years as we have committed as a country to the 30% conservation area. Although the state of nature is a risk for human well-being, it has been passed during past years, it has not been given any attention during the past years. The climate crisis has been much in the media and in people's minds, but biodiversity has been there somewhere behind. But I'm glad because this is now changing. As reported from the World Economic Forum, which this picture illustrates, the global biodiversity loss and related environmental risks are estimated to become one of the most critical threats to the global economy by the end of this decade. In addition, according to the Sir Dasgupta, about half of the GDP is directly dependent on nature. And this certainly underlines why businesses need to improve their understanding of the impact of the crisis and their role in reversing the current trend of biodiversity loss and how to act. And positive is that we know what should be done and how businesses could make this change happening. And this is also why we are here today. And now we will go to the report. And Jani Kellonen from the Bain will go through the highlights of the report. And after that, we will deep dive to some concrete solutions and how to make a change happening. Welcome, Jani.
Thank you, Liisa, and welcome everyone on my behalf as well. So my name is Jani Kelloniemi. the local managing partner of Bain Companyn in Finland. As an introduction, the focus on businesses' impact on the environment and climate has clearly increased rapidly over the past decades. However, when it comes to biodiversity and nature loss, businesses' awareness of the magnitude of their impact, as well as the extent of action taken, remains quite limited, and in many cases is far from sufficient. Clearly, there's an urgent need for large-scale transformative change. It's also crucial to speed up change, as the actions taken so far have been far from sufficient. Companies will have to adopt business models that are aligned with the planetary boundaries that we have. In order to help businesses pick up the pace, WWF Finland and Bain Companyn compiled an overview of the latest knowledge on biodiversity and nature loss, which carries significant relevance for all Finnish businesses, regardless of their size. So the purpose of the report is really to baseline, give understanding information on where we are today, what has been done, what could be done, and what are the actions that any business could take. Now, as Lisa already mentioned, biodiversity poses a threat, but also an opportunity. So $44 trillion of economic value generation, which is more than half of the world's total GDP, is moderately or highly dependent on nature, and as a result is exposed to risk from nature loss. As nature loses its capacity to provide such services, these industries could be significantly disrupted. At the same time, nature-positive solutions could create more than 10 trillion in annual business value and millions of new jobs. In addition to the new value to be generated, we expect a significant shift of value to companies that address biodiversity promptly and successfully. Hence, being an early mover provides an attractive position from which Finnish businesses can tap into the potential of nature-positive business models. So yes, there's a big risk. We need to address that one. At the same time, there are huge opportunities for Finnish businesses by taking action. I'll now hand over to Nikos Nirvi, who will go through the summary from our research.
Thank you, Jani. So as mentioned, as part of this report, we have conducted some research and surveyed and interviewed some of the largest Finnish companies to really understand and establish a view, what is the current understanding of the biodiversity as a topic? What is the general awareness of biodiversity crisis within Finnish businesses? How companies see their impacts on nature? And how far have the businesses come in initiating actions in addressing the biodiversity footprint and incorporating this to their strategies? And in this webinar, we just wanted to share you some highlights from the survey. Overall, even the biodiversity is a new field for many companies. One of the first findings is that the familiarity of the topic is actually quite high. 76% of the companies responded to our surveys rate that they are familiar or very familiar with biodiversity crisis. This view is also very much supported by our in-depth interviews with selected companies. And luckily, none of the companies really claimed that they completely lack the understanding or the familiarity of biodiversity crisis, although the depth of understanding might be varied, but still this reflects that the attention for the biodiversity has really picked up. At the same time, companies are quite aware of the potential risks that biodiversity loss may cause to their businesses. As we outline in the report, there are four main areas of risks that companies face in relation to the biodiversity crisis. First, physical risks. For example, the decline of ecosystem services and increased natural hazards. Regulatory risks, including additional costs from regulation and reporting for the businesses. Reputational risk, losing the brand value if not acting on. And finally, market risks, including increased cost or revenue loss of not adapting quickly enough to the changing conditions. And the survey indicates that there is a growing recognition of these risks. 84% of the companies perceive biodiversity loss a threat to their business, something which is also backed up by some of the World Economic Forum research we just covered. Moving on from the understanding the impacts of the biodiversity crisis, we have also explored how the companies perceive their own impact on biodiversity. Before jumping to the results, we wanted to engage you in this audience also with some same question, and we have initiated a short poll for you all. So we would like to ask you a same question here. Please estimate the impact your company has on biodiversity in Finland and abroad. You may also answer this from the point of affiliated companies you are aware of or working with. The answer options here range from no impact at all to very large impact. I'll give you 15 seconds to answer the poll, after which we will take a look at the results and how the companies have answered to our survey. So let's now we can take a look at the results. So interestingly, in this poll, 26% of the companies find that they have large or very large impact on biodiversity. This is actually quite in line with what we see in the survey, in which 26% of the companies rate their impact as large or very large. However, in the analysis that we conducted for this report, there seems to be a gap between the perception of companies' impact and the actual impact on biodiversity. One of the key analyses that we conducted based on the research, what we did, was outlining the pressures that the Finnish business sectors on an aggregate level put on the biodiversity. We won't go this through in detail during this webinar, but on high level, all business sectors have impacts and put their own pressures on biodiversity, either directly through their business or through their value chain. And while the impact of the various sectors differ across, as you will see in the report, all the business sectors have responsibility to act. Having dived into the understanding of this impact, we have also explored to what extent the companies are starting to prioritize biodiversity in their work and strategies. And again, before I jumped into the results of our survey, just wanted to involve you and asking the same question. Does your company have specific biodiversity-related targets? Again, you can see the answer options in the poll, and I'll give you 15 seconds to answer, after which we will take a look at the results and how this compares to the survey we had. Now let's get the results up. So interestingly, 37% of the respondents say here that the company has no specific biodiversity targets. Luckily, though, more than half of you feel that your company, or do know that your companies have some targets. So this is again very much aligned what we saw in the survey. Our survey found that 38% of the companies have no specific targets, and ones that do, there is still many targets where the actual targets are intangible, or there is no concrete timeline. So there is clearly an opportunity in this area for all the companies to make their biodiversity related targets and strategies more specific. We also know that from the deep that interviews that this is a topic that many of you are working on, but often we see that this is not yet implemented, or that there is still room to improve the specificity of the targets. However, supporting the interviews that we have, our survey reveals that there is a strong willingness to act, which is great news for the biodiversity. 3/4 of the respondents expressed active interest in participating in initiatives and collaboration to drive this further and become, and you want to become more educated and advanced in your thinking around the biodiversity and the impacts that your businesses have on nature. However, there's still some roadblocks despite the willingness to act. Many companies see the different types of roadblocks on their way, and it might not be easy to act today. In this report, we lay out the roadblocks experienced by you, and as well as Jussi will give in the next chapter of this webinar, we will lay out some concrete actions how to overcome these issues. But if I just give you a short summary of the roadblocks here, one of the main ones being here that some companies are not really aware of their impact. There might be lack of understanding of the scope of the impacts, or biodiversity may compete in the attention with the other ESG topics. Secondly, in the business context, this is still a very emergent field. While for example, climate change has been higher focus for many of you for a longer time. Thus, biodiversity still lacks, unfortunately, some metrics and measures and some regulation and reporting requirements, what we have seen in the other environmental issues. However, the changes are also on the way here. Thirdly, the final thing that the companies struggle for today is to demonstrate how initiatives on biodiversity drive value for the company. This is true when looking both the companies internally and when driving them across the supply chain. Biodiversity requires a holistic approach from all the businesses. And all in all, before moving on, our report is now out. You can find it online. There will be a link provided. And before I hand over to Jussi Nikula from WWF Finland to continue, I'll just do a short recap how this report can help you and help businesses in many ways. So first of all, this report will bring you knowledge on the topic and educate businesses on the impacts, risks, and potential opportunities with more nature positive approach. Secondly, this report presents general actions and solutions needed to happen to divert the crisis. Thirdly, our report summarizes the roadblocks, as just mentioned, and gives you concrete suggestions how to overcome this. And finally, the report provides you the guidance on what existing tools and frameworks you can utilize to get started already today and act for nature. Next, I'll hand over to Jussi to discuss how businesses can get ready to act and transition themselves towards more nature positive business models. Go ahead, Jussi.
Thank you, Jani. Thank you, Nico. And thank you, audience, for attending. Yes, I will talk about how will the transition shape businesses and how to get ready. And we have chosen quite practical approach presenting the parts of the report. But also, I would like to note that the transition as by definition means transformative change in many businesses. So it's a highly strategic question. Also, even though we present mostly quite practical things how to get ready in this webinar. First, I will talk about what is nature positive and how to do it, and then shortly about the transition and how to manage it, and then I will present the Biodiversity Risk Filter, which is a WWF tool made for businesses in helping incorporating biodiversity in their decision making and strategies. This is the biodiversity stewardship approach presented by WWF, and those of you who have been working for a longer time with biodiversity and also with climate will recognize that it's quite generic type of approach, and it's pretty well aligned with other frameworks like science-based targets for nature and so on. So, of course, firstly, companies need to raise the awareness and internal engagement with the biodiversity issues. And then, secondly, do analysis on their own operations and supply chains on the biodiversity impacts. Thirdly, setting targets, time-bound, concrete targets that are science-based. Then moving to the fourth phase, to the implementation, and of course, lastly, monitoring and communicating and iterating. So it's an iterative processes going back and forth. And I would like to highlight this bar below about collective action and policy advocacy. This is something that is also necessary. We see in some of the examples later on how collective action within the value chain and also more largely in the society is really important in order to move on with the transition in a smooth way. So, and also showing ambition towards the society and politicians by the companies is important part of that. About the challenge, sometimes quite often it's talked as nature positive, and there are many definitions depending on the aspects and different scopes about nature positive. But in the more simple form, it's about halting and reversing nature loss. So it includes two elements. We need to stop contributing to the biodiversity loss. And there on the left in the red arrow, we see the five main drivers of biodiversity loss as concluded by the International Panel on Biodiversity. So it's the land, freshwater and sea use chains. There is the resource exploitation, excessive resource exploitation. Then there's pollution, invasive species and diseases, and climate change. All of those needs to be halted and brought to the minimum, also regarding the value chains of the companies. But as we saw in Lisa's presentation, there's an emergency in nature already now. So we need to restore the nature also. More conservation, protection and landscape connectivity, and different types of ecosystem restorations. And then also moving on towards the halving the footprint of natural resources uses. So that last point basically is the key element of this transition, that we need to have our natural resources consumption approximately in order to be living within the planetary boundaries. Then, if we look at the avoiding and erasing the nature loss from the value chain. So this is also quite basics in a way. On the right-hand side, we have the really simplified value chain. So you have the supply chain, you have the own operations, and there's the consumption of and the demand for the products. So while companies have the tendency to focus on the own operations, because those are in the full control of the company, most of the companies find their biodiversity impacts in their supply chain, and that is clearly the majority of the impacts often happen in the supply chain. And there, for example, full traceability and for example, deforestation-free and conversion-free criteria on the supply are kind of simple things as principles, but at the moment there are challenges in achieving those. But that's why we're here now to improve the situation and to move forward with that. And then when we talk about the transformative change and the collective action, we see that in order to meet the needs of the consumers, we need to reinvent some of the business models. And there you cannot look at your value chain just by bit, but then you need to have more comprehensive approach, and also include in your customers and the final demand on that consideration. Some examples of the positive things, and maybe one thing that needed to be mentioned earlier also is that the positive actions, with the restoration, those cannot compensate for the erasing the biodiversity loss from the supply chain. So they are not interchangeables, but we need both with high ambition. So some of the examples from the supply chain collaboration is example from Vietnam, where Slow Coffee together with WWF worked with farmers and their agroforestry practices in the nearby the protected areas. So creating buffer zones and improving the livelihoods of the farmers. And another example comes with cotton and cotton farmers in India. That's a collaboration between WWF and H&M in Satapeta wildlife corridor. There is cotton farming ongoing. So there was also a collaboration between 6,000 farmers and other local stakeholders and H&M together with WWF in order to introduce more regenerative farming practices and ensuring a wildlife corridor between protected sites in order to allow wildlife to move between these protected sites. So, and that becomes business relevant not only through the contribution to the better status of biodiversity, but also enhancing the profitability of the farmers and regenerating local ecosystems that will make the supply of the cotton more stable also. So about the transition, shortly. This is one of the illustrations from the report, which is one of my favorites. And that illustrates how the kind of the maturity of the biodiversity issue develops over time. And also when in the beginning there's the acceptance of the issue and also building up the capacities of the company within the field of biodiversity. Then the kind of one of the first steps are the avoiding the directly harming nature. Some of the things I talked about with the red arrow. Avoid the direct harms to nature. But then moving on, companies are moving towards reducing overall impact on nature, meaning that designing business models and working through the whole value chain in order to minimize the overall demand of the natural resources. As we know, we are in the situation of overconsumption of natural resources. That is basically the indirect driver of the biodiversity loss. So that also needs to be tackled, and many companies are moving towards this one. And then also, lastly, while reinventing the business models in a way that they are compatible with planetary boundaries, there are also these new ways of adopting nature-positive business models. Some of those examples also shown here earlier with cotton and coffee. And I would like to note that many companies, every companies are different. And also many companies can be at the same time in different places within this curve. In one biodiversity aspect, they might be really advanced, but in another one, they might be still in the starting phase. And it's also an iterative process and a process of shared learning. But I hope we are all aiming for the nature positive business models. I selected just a couple of examples, quotes from the report from the interviewed companies. The first comment highlights the importance of building capacity. I find in my observations through this process of writing the report and from my experience, it seems to me while this topic is picking up speed and becoming a mainstream, there's a strong need for building the capacities of the companies. And then the other example from Fazer, I think that's a really interesting example in a way how to bring this in the management targets and but maybe for performance indicators, bringing disruptive innovations to the market as a target. I think that's quite an interesting example. Then let's move to a quick introduction to WWF Biodiversity Risk Filter. And this will be quite quick introduction because you can study more online and also with the different guidances that there are. So the risk filter is a tool for companies to identify their biodiversity risks, and it's built on or it's meant to complement and collaborate with existing tools and data providers. So there's, for example, cooperation with Encore, IBAT, and RepRisk, and their data, then their approaches are also used in collaboration with them, is used in this tool, and also try to make it, bring those together and make it more readily available for companies also. So the purpose of the tool is the screening of risks and prioritization of mitigation activities, and it's good for analyzing the operational and value chain sides, and the positive thing that there are visual outputs, and yes, you can see it's ease of use and such. It's free of charge and using global data sets, and it covers all sectors. It's especially explicit biodiversity specific data included, and so far it includes the physical and reputational risks, and the regulatory risks are to come. It has 4 modules that I will show quickly in next slides: the inform module, the explore module, and the assess module. And then the 4th module, the respond module, is to come. It's under development at the moment. So in the inform module, for example, there's the materiality overview of industries, which can help, which explores the different industries' dependency on ecosystem services and impacts on biodiversity. And this is, for example, quite largely based on the Encore data. Then there's the module of exploration, and there are maps of different biodiversity aspects at different geographical scales, helping identifying also the high risk areas through different also risk layers that are available. Then the next module where you can assess the data, you can update the data from specific locations, maybe businesses' own sites or supply chain sites, and also on a portfolio level. And when you upload the data, and here's just a kind of an mock-up example of imaginary company locations throughout the world, and then analyzing that data will bring the you can use this for the prioritization of your biodiversity risks. For example, on the lower left corner, you have the physical risks versus reputational risks plotted, where you can kind of identify hotspots and also see where your focus might be most needed. And then you can do also the analysis side by side, like for example, the slide number 15, regarding different risk types and categories. What are their scores? So the tool is meant to be user-oriented model for biodiversity-related risks to businesses. So identify, and it's also not a footprint tool. And it's also very much aligned with different new frameworks like SBTN and also with the TNFD LEAP. So the data can be used in those processes. Okay, there was a lot of it. I hope you can take a look at the report, study the Biodiversity Risk Filter, but also why not contacting us? We are happy to talk more. Thank you. Then Jonas takes over. Thank you.
Thank you, Liisa, Jani, Nico, and Jussi for the great presentations. We now have time for a few questions from the chat. The first one go to Nico and Jani. How do you see biodiversity risks and opportunities in service sectors which do not have a direct link to biodiversity, for example, healthcare services?
Thanks, Jonas. And naturally, not all the sectors have a direct impact on nature, but almost all of the companies do have impact through their supply chains. And but everybody's using inputs from this primary sector for like agriculture or mining, and then the secondary sectors increase the demand of these type of services. So this is really an area where all the companies, even though they're either are they directly impacting or secondarily impacting the nature, should act, and there are opportunities and risks for both. So if I think about the risks for this type of service companies, like they still are the same. So your customers do not necessarily care if it's you or one of the companies in your supply chain who had a reputational issues or who did not act for best of the nature. They are buying the service from you. So it is beneficial for you as a service provider to make sure that all the services that you provide start to have a positive impact on nature. Then think about the opportunities side, of course, like the risk avoidance is a big topic also for the secondary businesses having a secondary impact on the nature. Other being also the access to finance. As we have seen with the green bonds, for instance, like the companies which take more care of their impacts to climate change or impact to nature, they have a better access to finance. So this can also become more of the competitive advantage going forward if you are the first mover in this area.
Thank you, Nico. The second question would go to Jussi or Liisa. Do you have any local examples from Finland where biodiversity has been increased and enhanced?
I can start and then Jussi can continue if it's okay for you, Jussi. So that is a good question. Although I explained in my presentation that also Finland has a lot to do concerning the biodiversity, there are of course many positive examples. For instance, freshwaters, all migratory fish are endangered. And for that reason, we have been opening the dams and helping the rivers to throw and free again. And we have been working together with some companies and also which have an impact on the rivers and also with the support of the companies, opening the dams. And you can see the positive impact quickly. So the migratory fish comes to the rivers as soon as we have opened them. And a second example I would like to say concerning the forest, as I explained to you that more than 70% of our forests are endangered. But on the other hand, we have worked together with some companies on a smaller scale in the forests and changing the forest practices on more sustainable level. So that is something that we know how to do and the companies know to do, but this really needs to go to the next level so that all of the Finnish forests the forestry is sustainable in all forests and also the conservation area is increased. And maybe the third example could be concerning food. As I told you, so 70% globally from the biodiversity loss is caused from the food production, the food we eat and what we produce. And in Finland, we started to work for more sustainable diets for more than 10 years ago. And now there is more and more vegetarian food available in Finland. And that is a real change. And it has an impact on Finland, but also, of course, globally. So maybe Jussi, if you would like to continue from this.
Thank you. Liisa covered many points already there. Maybe continuing on the food, I think this is a great example of what Liisa mentioned about providing tasty and good vegetable based alternatives. So that's one of the transformative changes, like changing the demands and also the or providing the consumers new kinds of solutions that have much lower footprint than the other alternatives. But then also with food, there's always exceptions. There are always exceptions. With one big challenge for the cultural landscape and the agricultural landscape biodiversity is the decline of grazing in these traditional habitats. So the standard production it doesn't include grazing much anymore. So there are examples also where this natural pasture grazing-based meat is actually really important for keeping up the biodiversity in the agricultural landscapes. But of course, we need to remember that such meat is in availability is really low. So there's of course the diversity of the production is also good, but also it should be done in a way that really helps the nature, because these many of the endangered species in the agricultural landscapes are dependent on these open habitats where grazing is needed.
Jonas, if you don't mind, I would add a few. If you look at the report, there's a few case examples from Finnish companies from different sectors that we found quite inspiring. So there's one with Ilmarinen and the biodiversity roadmap that they developed during 2022. There's a case example from S Group as they are developing their biodiversity footprint and the calculation method for being able to address that one. There's others around Fatser we mentioned already earlier, Yalot Tofu, Spinnova. So there are multiple examples of Finnish companies who are taking action and taking it decisively and actually benefiting from doing it. And those examples are included in the report.
Thank you. This next one could go to Jussi. Many guidelines and tools have been developed in the last 10 years for companies to assess biodiversity impacts and dependencies. Is the landscape of this available know-how too fragmented? How to further and more systematically mainstream such guidelines and tools in company environmental management systems reporting, etc.?
Yes, thank you. That is a great question. And let's say that a year ago, I many times said when I discussed with companies and different events about this issue, I said that one thing that I can guarantee is confusion. And with this thing, I refer to this landscape of multiple guidances and such things. But I think that's just natural. When there's in a way, there's a moment of disruption. There's a really highly increased attention to the topic, and of course we need to then kind of manage it. And we don't know right away how to manage such a complex topic. So there are different kind of initiatives, different kind of tools, different kind of frameworks popping up. And as usual, then the best ones will survive. And there will be, in a natural way, there will be some kind of the landscape will be simplified and condensed, and some of the major approaches and major frameworks will kind of find their way and become norms in a way. One of the main ones that WWF has been involved in developing is the science-based targets for nature, SBTN, and that is I think, becoming one of the main ones. Thanks.
Thank you. The next one could go to Nico and Jani. Actually, there's two questions. How can I go about preparing a company-wide biodiversity strategy or company biodiversity action plan? And is there a difference in company size in terms of how to get started?
So first of all, the biodiversity topic should be incorporated in the corporate strategy and to really tackle and overcome these issues, and also to take advantage of being the front runner in this front and being able to be the first ones to really capture the opportunities that are coming from this. As Jani started the presentation, there is a significant opportunity identified with the nature positive business models, and we feel strongly that the leading companies should take action and incorporate this to their strategies. And of course, within the companies, this can start also from even either on the grassroots level, or that then they should come to start from the top down level. But I think both of the aspects are really important to get moving on the topic.
I think the first step for any company would be to understand the impact on biodiversity. So what are we doing? What are the implications throughout the supply chain? That's the starting point, understanding the impact, and then starting to look at, okay, what can we do in order to avoid the impact, reduce the impact, regenerate and restore. And then, as Jussi mentioned, think about the transformative changes that are required in order to minimize the impact.
Thank you. I think we have to start to wrap things up. We couldn't answer all questions from the chats, but we are here for you also after this webinar. So please don't hesitate to contact Bain Company or WWF Finland. We will be glad to work with you to help your business with your work on biodiversity. Thank you all for joining. We will be sending a link to the recording and also a link to the report shortly. Thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.